Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to our continuing education course on Florida-friendly landscaping for the hurricane season. I see lots of familiar friends here, some board members, as well as fellow managers, and a few new friends. It's great to have all of you with us. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. I'm Bill Campbell, one of the partners here at Campbell Property Management. We're proud to serve over 400 communities from Miami-Dade to the Treasure Coast. One thing is we believe in being part of the community and serving the community where we live. We're continually refining our webinars and services to adapt to your changing needs. We welcome your input and your feedback on how to better serve you and serve our community. We're offering this course today so that we can give you great information, serve the community, the board members, property managers, and to make your job a little bit easier. Hopefully you'll learn something. Thanks to you, you all make your community a better place to live. You're true heroes. In addition to the webinars we offer, we also have the Florida Association News, a free monthly newsletter and blog of resources for associations on industry news, legal issues, events, and education. I encourage you all to check out getfan.org. You can also find all of our events at campbellevents.org. We've had over 600 people register for this webinar. It's great to have all of you with us. Thanks for taking your valuable time to join us. And we certainly hope to have some helpful and fun information for you. We also appreciate any feedback and your filling out of the survey at the end. We're here to serve you and to help you and to make your lives easier. Now let's turn it over to Shane Humble of Complete Property Maintenance, who will be conducting today's seminar. Shane, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Bill. Thank you, Ashley and Bill. Appreciate the introduction. So today, yes, we are here for a state certified 2-hour CEU class on Florida-friendly landscaping. So if you are here for Styling 101 and how to become your own barber during lockdown, you are not in the right class, and I definitely would not be the right instructor for that one. So I thank you all for joining us. I will admit today is the first time that I am presenting this class that we've had registered for a number of years now via Zoom. I'm used to it being very interactive and stood up in front of an audience. So if my tempo is off or I start to get monotone, please let me know in the Q&A to either speed it up, slow it down, and feel free to throw in those questions as often as you would like, because this class is intended to be very interactive. So let's get started. So again, Florida-friendly landscaping. This class was originally put together for HOAs, condo association, property managers, board of directors, and those interested in Florida landscaping. Let's see here now. Let me just make sure I've got my drive in here. What would that be if I wasn't actually able to get through the slides after all this?
Shane, just try clicking that arrow on the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah, all right. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do that, but okay. All right, so we'll start off with some of the legal that pertains to how this first came about and why it was created. So back in 2004, Florida legislator created the section 373.228. This was directed from the Florida wastewater management districts as well as the DEP and several interested parties to help devise standards for landscape irrigation and Florida-friendly landscape design. These standards were officially adopted back in December of 2006, and all local ordinances in Florida adopted after this date, they must use these standards. The 6 principles for the landscaping, friendly landscaping, really circumvent around a book that was produced called Best Management Practices. And the 6 principles are the right plant being in the right place. And we're going to touch on all of these in depth as we go through the presentation today. The use of efficient watering, the appropriate fertilization used in each of the areas pertaining to the landscape, the principles of why you mulch, the attraction of wildlife, as well as the responsible management of pests. And again, we'll get into each aspect as we go through. Why were these principles first adopted, or what was the reason for doing this? And the best management practices were really brought about to help minimize the environmental impacts, yet meet the clients' and customers' expectations. And this came through, if you remember, there was a real boom in South Florida back in 04, 5, 6, before we had that horrendous crash in 8. We were finding developments were popping out through South Florida all over. Land was being purchased, homes were being built at an unprecedented rate. And I think the local municipalities were saying, what do we have here to protect ourselves against concrete jungles being produced? And it's a very difficult balance to get back to these developers at the time, how to balance and achieve utilizing a footprint of a commercial property, whether it be a bank, gas station, strip mall, condo being erected, or an HOA, for example, as well as satisfying the parking needs, the pedestrian traffic, the requirements for the landscape, as well as maximizing the runoff within a property where there is now substantial amount of impervious surfaces, while also allowing the developer the potential to still create his revenue required and being attractive. This landscape practice typically will include an array of turf grass, ground cover, landscape plants or material, as well as palms and trees. This term Florida friendly that we're using today really refers to the ability to utilize native plant materials because they're well adapted and they're considered a non-invasive ornamental. Also utilizing as many native palms or trees that we can, that still can be self-sustained within the footprint of the property, as well as make a kind of a more attractive balance to the property through light, shade, controlling habitat requirements, soil erosion, as well as reducing the noise for surrounding communities or neighbors, as well as the temperature within that new footprint. So the first principle of the 6 principles that we first discussed on the first slide was right plant, right place. This really refers to the plant selection and where it's located. Simple enough, right? After weather, the cultural practice that plays the biggest role in the success of an agronomic program will include the following 4 items. However, just to touch on right plant, right place, that's the culmination of an architect, an engineer, and a landscaper basically discussing where that plant's going to be situated on the property. Will it have the ability to flourish and thrive in that environment? Would you plant a sun-loving shrub on the north side of a 2-story building? No, it's not what you would ideally want to do and should not do. However, not all architects have worked out in the field and know exactly what works and what doesn't work, and that's where you need the input from a landscaper. So in regards to the 4 things that is going to take place in regards to putting the right plant in the right place, which also refers to turf grass, is the mowing height. Making sure that the grass that's utilized within the landscape is being maintained at the correct height. For example, St. Augustine ideally is to be mowed at 3.5 to 4 inches of turf blade. Maybe a Bermuda should be at 1 inch or so or less. A zoysia maybe 1 to 1.5 inch, but each particular turf grass is going to have its own requirements. So pruning. Obviously, a landscape is going to have a number or selection of either what we want to call ornamental ground covers, shrubs. These are all going to require a different maintenance plan. And that plan may come down to hand trimming. It may use a mechanical shear based on when it flowers, or the structure of the leaf, if it will allow that type of pruning to take place. Next thing, after the turf and plants and everything are in the ground, what are we going to do in regards to fertilizer? And the correct application or the blend that's going to be used comes down to what's there. A lot of native material wants to be utilized here in Florida as part of a best management practice because it requires very little fertilization and has adapted well to our soil sand structure. And we don't necessarily need to hit that unless there's our times extreme drought or an extreme temperature. But each of the other material placed also has to take into consideration the tiering effect and how closely one plant is planted to another, and will it require the same fertilization. Here in Florida, we tend to do a lot of tiered landscaping, and may or may not give us the opportunity to do that. The last of these four cycles that we need to pay attention to year round is irrigation. Irrigation really ties the others all in, as well as all landscape, whether it be a drip system, rotors, mist heads. And again, irrigation is really only to be used to supplement the rainfall that we get in nature. And one prime example of that is St. Augustine, which was developed here in Florida by the University of Florida, requires about 50 inches of annual rainfall a year. And would you know it? Florida averages about 50 inches of annual rainfall per year. So yeah, granted, it doesn't always rain 4 inches a month every month to try to give that equal amount. So that's when we use irrigation to supplement during months of drought and to turn off during months of extreme moisture. So, they all sound very different, but they are absolutely undisputably related. So for example, if you were to try and fertilize during a drought period, this is really going to lead to some very heavy leaching after a strong rain, because the soil is going to crust over and not necessarily allow that rainfall to percolate through as quickly as you would like. And yet it's going to take that fertilizer granule and take it with it to a drain or to maybe a non-pervious surface. So what then happens? Well, that inadequately fertilized material then is going to lead to a thin and a weak plant, which is then going to be more susceptible to insect and disease. This weakened plant is not going to have a strong root system, which is then going to allow it to struggle to retain the soil in the root zone, which then leads to soil erosion and possible water pollution. So this gives us an example of how related these four practices are. All right, let me take a look up here and we're going to see if we've got any questions or answers that we might want to touch on real quick. Okay, so we're just obviously just talked about water there. We have a question about is well water better than city water? Depends how filtered or non-filtered the well water is and how good the well is. Some wells contain an extreme amount of iron, which might be great for your St. Augustine turf, but may not be as great for your plants that are not in requirement of a high nitrogen content. And typically our wells here in South Florida are anywhere from say 23 feet down to about 80 to find the biggest and best water source. As probably most of you know, Florida is situated on a very large aquifer, and depending on how close we are to the ocean, will also determine how good the water source is from a well. And I've had properties that are so close to the ocean that they're having saltwater intrusion, and obviously that doesn't help at all for the plant material. Correct mowing height for St. Augustine grass here in South Florida, Palm Beach Gardens in particular, should be 3.5 to 4 inches, which is the typical height in all of South Florida that's within the zone 10. Okay, so some components of healthy turf. This is a picture, I think if I'm not mistaken, this is along Donald Ross up here in the Palm Beach Gardens, Jupiter area. Healthy turf is viewed as an asset, and it plays an important role in reducing water runoff in the urban and the suburban properties that contain a significant area of an impervious surface. This is again touching on when a strip mall or plaza is created where the parking lots and sidewalks don't allow that water to percolate through. Why they will use turf grass is it actually will reduce the amount of runoff that's produced, as it can really process greater amounts of rainfall than obviously than a concrete area, which also then will help increase the biodegradation of the organic pollutants, air contaminants, and any pesticides that may need to be used in that particular area. This photo in particular has, quite a lot of turf. Is it necessary to have that much? My opinion, I think it could probably utilize a larger bed containing more shrubs, more native, because that turf, I'm going to say, is going to need some supplemental irrigation from somewhere. All right. I took these pictures a number of years ago. And I always was impressed. If any kind of outdoorsmen and women out there, this was Gander Mountain off of North Lake Boulevard. This was a really impressive structure that was built, I want to say maybe 10, 12 years ago. And it's now, I think, unfortunately, it closed down and became a at-home or some other type of department store for home furnishings or something. This property did an excellent job of integrating a really smart design that matched the characteristics of the property, as well as the client's desires or the municipality's requirements, to create a really pleasing, aesthetically enhancing property to the structure itself. It took into account, or would have needed to take into account prior to being landscaped, all of the sun attributes, the shade, soil type, pH, the compaction, slope, and drainage that were created by multiple pieces of large equipment driving over the site in order to construct the building. As kind of just touch on there, but most of those activities lead to severe compaction and probably a necessity to bring in additional soils that are non-native. And that makes it really difficult to get your plant material to thrive, not knowing how inert the soil is that you're bringing in. So we talked about plant selection a little bit for right plant, right place. So based on a site evaluation, the plants that are selected should be really suited to the characteristics. Back on Gander Mountain, they used a lot of native material in order to help it look as if the building had been there for a long time and just was being dropped right into the site. So the landscape should improve the appearance or the usefulness by providing shade to the parking areas, thus, reducing the heat in those impervious areas, which would also, significantly reduce the cooling cost to the structure itself. It should also be positioned to provide a smooth transition from the structure to the landscape, screening any roadways, and direct the traffic flow properly onto and within the property. Okay, one thing I really would like to stress here, moving on to one of the next principles, is irrigation. So efficient watering versus irrigation, something I really want to stress here, and it's kind of critical. Plants do not waste water, people do. And what I mean by that is, we can tend to look at something and make a determination that it needs water when in fact it doesn't, or don't quite yet understand how to identify true stresses either on turf or plant material. Most of these commercial properties, when they're being constructed, they modify the soil and the habitat to fit into the needs of the site. And in order for it to receive that certificate of occupancy, they've had to address the municipality's requirements. And all that does sound great, but one of the factors that's not get considered is, what am I going to use for my irrigation system? Primarily the controller, not necessarily the structure, in the substrate, but what is controlling the output. I'm going to take a couple of minute break here, see if we can address a couple of questions, just so I don't skip over anything too quick. All right, drought season, generally speaking, in the Tri-County area. For us, in previous years, this is a question from Rosario Walker, is usually, over the last few years, it has not stuck true. November through March tends to be our dry season. Not always. I remember a few years back, I think we had something like 11 inches of rain in February. It was unheard of, and it was cooler, and we had fungus popping up throughout South Florida on numerous properties for the next month or so. Let's see here. All right. Marcy Green, we will get back to you on your question regarding the injections at the base of the trees for black olives for caterpillars. Thank you for that question. Let's see. Xeriscaping, this is from Christina. Xeriscaping is not something that we cover in this class because it's not considered, a lot of that material is not Florida native, which does not fall under the best management practices, but is a whole separate kind of designs that is becoming more and more popular in South Florida, and our companies got on board. We feel there's a real need for it potentially coming up in the future. Okay, one last question here before we get going. Linda asked, should the tree leaves and grass clippings be blown off the lawn, or is it okay to let the tree leaves accumulate? So depends what the tree leaves are. Oak tree leaves, for example, are extremely difficult, and we find they don't mulch well, and they do not break down easily. So those we suggest to be blown off or raked before cutting the grass, as that accumulation will not turn into thatch that will organically be broken down. Okay, I hope that answers a few there. Let's move on to the next slide. Most native plants, trees and grasses require roughly 40 to 55 inches of irrigation per year, which is our average, as I brought up before. But however, it's not spread evenly over those 12 months. And so some months are going to require supplemental. One thing I think that there needs to be a big push for now in a lot of our homeowners association and condo associations, if they are cresting on that 15, 20, 25-year-old system, is the introduction of smart irrigation systems, which will utilize weather stations. The weather stations can act as, for example, in the photo provided, it looks like kind of a triple cone, small version above the extender from the clock. That particular device there is actually reading precipitation rates, humidity, evapotranspiration, all within that little device. And it is sending back that data to a central hub at midnight each night, which then speaks to the clock and tells it what it may need for the upcoming few days. There are also soil moisture sensors or rain sensors that are attached to a device like this. The soil moisture sensors, as well as the rain sensors, in my opinion, are not very effective. We use them in cases where the clock will only allow those to be utilized and not a weather station. And the reason being that the sensors would have to be in so many locations throughout the yard that we're not truly getting an accurate reading. If we were to take a, as an example, a 0 lot line home in an HOA, what that sensor is reading on the north side versus the south or the 0 lot line side are going to be extremely different from each other, and yet they don't take into consideration an average. And that also goes with the rain sensor. The rain sensor is nothing but a small cork or a float device that sits in a cup that collects the water and basically will be triggered or activated when to turn off the system when that float is not hitting the sensor. But as we all know, in South Florida, we could have rain for 30 minutes, that cup is going to be filled, and an hour later, that water has dried up due to the temperatures. And if that happens at, say, 2 a.m. in the morning, and the rainfall that fell and was captured has already been, kind of absorbed into the atmosphere, the sensor is going to drop back down and tell the irrigation system it's okay to turn back on. So I've never found those to be very adequate in providing a good measurement. So the newer systems now are going to take in all of those items, as well as allow you to punch in the soil type and the zip code to better understand the weather patterns in that area. All right, so here are, I've listed some sites that are appropriate for learning more about the Florida Irrigation Society. And, why do we want to use or bring in irrigation system design, as well as the correct installation or management of this will all provide benefits in many ways. It's going to help you save money. And the save money not only refers to if you're on city water and paying for that water to irrigate each individual property, common area, homeowner. If you're even on a well and there's a pump, it's going to save the life of the pump by not running as frequently. So the lifespan is going to be increased, and you're also using less electricity in regards to that as well. How, those designs are going to help you use water more efficiently. And in doing so, it's going to help create a healthier, drought-resistant and pest-resistant landscape. The more we irrigate, as I said before, plants don't waste water, people do. The turf grass knows itself to send root systems deeper in basically in search of water if it doesn't have enough rainfall, because the top inch or two is going to dry up quicker than 6-8 inches down. And once those root systems reach the deeper soil layers where there's moisture, they're not going to require as much irrigation, and you're not going to see them wilt or discolor as quick. We also are right now in a desperate need to protect our state water reserves, and a lot of that's been demonstrated recently on new fertilization regulations taking place in the summer when we get a lot of rainfall. All right, back onto irrigation and design. This is one of the ones that I will tell you is extremely frustrating for a landscape maintenance company. And I'm not sure at what level this is going to get corrected or why. Obviously, during conventions and forums, we, I should tell you, it's probably a good time to introduce this to you. I sit on the certification committee for the Florida Nursery Grower Landscape Association. So when we have our state conferences, I'm one of the representatives that brings information back and forth between landscape companies, state boards, et cetera, back to the FNGLA for discussion as to what are new requirements, what are we looking for to protect our industry. And one of the things, for example, just this year, the FNGLA has introduced a new certification class for irrigation contractors. One of the things that has been very prevalent is people practicing changing irrigation systems designs who are not licensed to do so. And that is a real struggle for the South Florida Water Management to get a hold of. So we're trying to introduce more certification to make sure landscapers are aware and able to do what they need to do. So where the frustration comes in, developer comes onto a property, designs these amazing, beautiful associations, homeowner associations, condo associations, malls, etc. And what we find is that there will be a bed at a front entrance. It's beautiful, you know, fountains and stonework on these entrances. And then you've got these areas that have been designated for annuals. And they are right in the middle of a turf grass section. And that turf grass section, it contains a number of rotors to adequately supplement irrigation when needed. And the annuals do not have their standalone irrigation zone. So we find that we now have to turn on the rotor zone additionally daily to make sure those annuals being planted have enough water. Sounds great. However, the turf grass really suffers, and we find we end up getting fungus or other issues of turf becoming weaker in the areas where the annuals are planted. So as a group in the various organizations that exist for landscapers, we've been trying to make a big push to get back to the developers and have them designate zones for rotors, designate zones that will just miss the plant material, or drip zones for annuals that can allow the root system to get enough adequate irrigation and not obviously, let's say, burned off in the midday summer heat. You know, the other problem we find is that there may be mist heads within rotor zones, so then you're irrigating at different rates, and that's a whole another topic of discussion. But they also, we find that in any community, whether it be, you know, in any part of the state and any demographic in terms of house price, we find a zone that has been set up to water the zero lot line side of the house. So that zero lot line typically does not allow plant material to thrive, whether it be grass or shrubs, because you've got potentially 2 one-story or 2 two-story homes side by side, creating an absolute shade situation. And not only is there a zone on the zero lot line side spraying towards the other home, there is a zone on that home spraying towards the other residence. So doubly irrigating a section that does not have the ability to evapotranspirate well, burn off due to the sun coming in. And almost every HOA that we happen to be fortunate enough to be maintaining, we have found over the course of, you know, our business been 45 years now, that within a year or so of each of these homes being constructed, that turf grass has already broken down and become weeds. And we're looking for an alternate to create a pleasing path back to the, you know, rear yard, and also watering on the north side, which also is difficult to sustain. Okay, so we've irrigated now, and we know that our irrigation is set up properly. What is one of the next most, you know, kind of, I don't want to say generally needed, but here in South Florida, we are dealing with a lot of sandy soils, and we don't have the same organic material breaking down in the soils that are, say, north of Jacksonville, Georgia line going north. You know, yes, they might have some clays, but we have a very, very nutrient deficient soil here in South Florida. I don't know if it's from all the construction, whether it's from the rainfall, the sun, but we are known for having sand. So within most communities, we have noticed the need to supplement fertilization. Up north, that practice is done less than it is down here in South Florida. So let's talk about what a fertilizer is. A fertilizer means any substance that contains one or more recognized plant nutrients and will help the plant grow. it will control, potentially it can control the acidity or the alkalinity based on the mix, and can provide other soil enrichment products or corrective measures to the soil. So the term grade or analysis, this falls into the 3 letters that you will find on a bag of fertilizer. And typically on any bag, you will see the letters NPK or 3 numbers. For the example I provided, it's 10, 10, 10. Those numbers correlate to the percentage of weight of that product in the bag. So these have to be guaranteed by the manufacturer to be present in that bag of fertilizer. It is law. Now it is law, as well as it is now law here in South Florida to be certified to apply fertilizer. That's something very new here in the state. That was just adopted, I want to say, somewhere around 2012, 2013. And I think I might have a slide for that later on in the presentation. But the label must contain on it the brand name, the grade of the fertilizer, which is the percentage of weight of each of those 3 properties, as well as who manufactured it and their address, as well as the guaranteed analysis of that bag. And all sources of the secondary nutrients, which are considered called the micronutrients, and the weight of the bag. Most fertilizers are presented in either 40 or 50-pound bags. And that, for this example here, the 10, 10, 10 refers to the percentage of weight of the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and potassium that is present in the bag. So 30% of the weight of that bag of fertilizer contains those 3 products. The rest of the weight that is not accounted for will fall into what they consider to be sludge, or the percentage of the micronutrients that are also in the bag. So let's see here. I want to just double check as we're talking about fertilization, if we have any questions that pertain to that. Okay, let's see. One of the questions is not necessarily pertaining to fertilization, but it can fall into this category. Alberto asked whether or not the soil turf that needs to be spiked so that it gets air oxygen. Okay, so that is an interesting question, and I'm going to answer this one now because it could fall into the category of fertilizer. St. Augustine turf does not need to be spiked or aerated. That turf grows via stolons and rhizomes. So the actual act of spiking the turf can break the rhizomes and stolons that are growing across and down from the turf. However, what we call shortgrass, Bermudas, zoysias, etc., that turf yearly needs to be what we call aerated, top dressed, and potentially either reseeded or verticut. And that is a practice that absolutely has to be done a minimum of once a year, and typically done just prior to summer in order to allow it to regrow quickly. So thank you for that question. That was pertinent. And why I bring it up is it will allow fertilizers and the proper practice to help strengthen the turf along with that program. Okay, let's see here. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, let's talk about this in terms of, let's say you have a landscaper on property, and one of the most critical aspects of your landscape here in Florida, because we talked about that we have very inert soils or sands, is the application of fertilizer. There is a substantial difference in price on a bag of fertilizer. And the reason being that those 3 products are the expensive portion of the bag. So using for example, a fertilizer such as 666. This is a fertilizer blend that in the past we would use on ficus hedge, because primarily that ficus hedge grew like a weed. It really didn't need a lot of fertilizer, but it did need a boost every now and again. And that would be a product that would be used. However, if we were to move on to, say, a croton or a colorful shrub or a hibiscus, we may want to use a 13-3-13 or 12-4-12, which is a really great blend to give all the micronutrients to those particular shrubs. But the critical factor comes down to the solubility of the material. So the higher the water soluble of the N, the longer lasting the fertilizer will be. So for example, on a bag, let's see if we can just backtrack here. It might say it on here. Okay, so it's got the soluble percentages up there, total N. On bags today, you'll notice that it may say 40%, 50%, 75%. The more premium a bag of fertilizer, the higher number that percentage is going to be, dictating how long that fertilizer is going to take to break down. There are blends now that are coated with various layers that will give a full 90-day feed on a particular pellet or granule. And that's really important. I always say if you have a landscape liaison or a manager and you're concerned about whether or not your property is being fertilized, for a landscaper, that's a very hard cost that you cannot get away from. If somebody was trying to potentially, if budget's tight and they've used too many hours, they may go to using a bag of fertilizer that's not necessarily got all of the prime nutrients in it in order to save costs. So I definitely encourage inspection of the bag to see what exactly you're getting. Here in South Florida, St. Augustine typically needs about 3 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square foot of turf per year. The higher rates may work in areas where, let's just say, for example, if you had reclaimed water, there's so many nutrients already available in reclaimed water that rate could definitely be down in the 3 to 4 pound range and be fine. Whereas, city water that's been depleted of all nutrients in the water, you might want to up that to 6 pounds. There are various labs that will provide soil samples or analysis for you. They're A&L, I'm not even sure, unfortunately, after what we've just gone through, that A&L Labs is actually still around. We've been sending all of our soil samples to the University of Florida direct through a vendor called Site One. And they've been getting them back to us pretty quick. That'll help us recognize what we need. Okay, so it was 2014. That was when the state certified that in order to put down fertilization, you need to have the correct or have passed the correct test, and it's an actual physical as well as a written test. And I mentioned before, any individual in the state that is going to test for this exam, as well as a landscape maintenance contractor, landscape design installer, or irrigation. I sit on the committee and I actually proctor the exams. And I can tell you, it was very interesting to find how many people coming through knew the reasons why you should apply fertilizer, but didn't actually know what the numbers correlated to and how they were to be applied. And a lot of times you can go to Home Depot, you can buy a bag of, say, Scott's fertilizer. Across on the other side of the aisle, they have a Scott's spreader, and that bag of fertilizer will tell you exactly where that spreader needs to be set based on the application rates. That's all fine and good, but do you know why you're doing it? Or, how fast are you walking? Which is, it's kind of, it doesn't necessarily seem important, but it definitely takes into place. So, okay, so why, and also I'll tell you that currently in the state right now, if I'm just going to go back just a couple of slides here. So phosphorus, the middle P on NPK, the state has now kind of ordained or placed in an ordinance that you are no longer allowed to put phosphorus down. So at least in depends on your county and the time of year being applied. So most blends now are going to be like a 24-0-10, a 12-0-12. That has definitely changed over the last few years. And the bottom section there we just talked on there. Okay, ring of responsibility. This really comes down to the best management practices again, and what does that respond to? So most properties being developed here in Florida will either have something like a retention area, will have a pond or lakes developed, and it's done for a number of reasons to take the excess runoff, either for aesthetics. The state has put into place that along a body of water, whether it be a canal, pond, lake, whatever you may have there on your property, that you are not to apply chemicals such as herbicides or apply fertilizers within 10 feet of that body of water if you are using a broadcast spreader, and within 3 to 7 feet if you're using a drop spreader, as obviously with those you can more accurately apply the fertilization. In terms of new grass being planted, you really don't want to apply fertilizer to that newly installed sod within the first 30 to 60 days, because you have to imagine the root system has just been cut coming from the sod farms, because here we don't grow St. Augustine by seed. It's only done by the piece and grown in a sod farm somewhere. Those roots are very, let me say, fresh or susceptible to burn. So if you were to fertilize them, potentially that fertilizer could burn the root tip and affect its growth pattern. So we try not to do that. And I don't know how many of you may, this was a very popular kind of system introduced maybe 15 to 20 years ago, and it didn't last long. Some of you may still have some of these systems sitting around non-utilized, and that is called fertigation. Somebody had the genius idea to put a tank next to the irrigation system and add an injection pump, fill the tank with a liquid fertilizer or soluble, something like a 20-20-20, and what happened is we found that the if not adequately positioned or placed just right, the nitrogen content in that water would stain a person's vehicle, concrete, pavers, whatever it may be, and became a real problem. So those systems quickly got shut down and went back to normal irrigation systems. And then also, we can talk a little bit about how to fertilize a plant material. So we're going to talk about this later. So I'm going to save the correct way how to do this on some of the items till later. But I can tell you it should never be thrown on top. And there's really not a need here in Florida to individually fertilize trees, because a majority of them are getting a lot of the nutrients because their root system is underneath a body of turf grass. But we can touch on that later. Okay, let's take a little break here. We'll got some more questions that have come in, and I don't know if also we're almost an hour in here. So if anybody wants to take a stretch, or feel free to step out, and we'll just go through a couple of these questions. So Peanut, I'm not sure if that question from Violet is regarding the ornamental peanut, which I think it is, and that is being used on and off throughout South Florida. It's put a lot of it is put along the roadways because it can actually be mowed like a typical turf grass or weed eated and maintained. I like it. It does have the ability to, if the soil doesn't provide enough adhesion, we find that it becomes thin and weak. That's the only reason why I would suggest not to potentially use it. Let's see, my favorite fern, this is a question from Philip Hartfield, a substitute for ferns. Well, my favorite fern is the wart fern, but he's asking for a substitute that will do well in shade in the winter and full sun in the summer. That is a difficult one to have sustain both properties. You know, it doesn't particularly get very full, but Jasmine minima, which is very low growing, can seem to do well in both sun and shade. However, it's very difficult to maintain the amount of weeds that we find that grows within it. Let's see here, let's scroll down. Okay, Jay Wallace is asking about what are the restrictions for using, I'm guessing that is Lake Worth canal waters. So each municipality will have their own kind of ordinances. The Lake Worth Drainage District, which I think is in charge of most of those canal waters, may have a permit that is required to be utilized if you're tapping into their canals. I know one of our properties, which was grandfathered in, pulls from that we use to irrigate our nursery there. And we don't have any restrictions that are set upon us except for when water restrictions are lowered, and then we'll follow those. But other than that, nothing else. Optimum time to water shrubs that are within 100 yards of the ocean. This is a question from Richard Stoney. So it tends, in my kind of experience, wind loads tend to increase as the day goes on within coastal properties. It tends to be a little bit less through the night hours and early morning. So I think the best time is to water, 5, 6 a.m. so that water will not only have a greater chance of being absorbed, but also coat the material. The other thing you have to consider is the goal to reduce the amount of salt stuck on the plant material, and then should we be irrigating closer to 2 or 3 or 4 when it's had a full day's worth of trade winds blown onto them. So each property, I think, is going to be different. Okay, Rosaria asked about how Bermuda grass is being used in the Tri-County areas. There are a number of grasses in development, whether it be a Bermuda tiff or ones that are currently in process that will be a lot more resistant to pests, require a lot less water, and these are coming out almost every other year as alternatives. Bahia obviously is the one turf grass that does not require any supplemental irrigation or fertilization. However, it is nowhere near as attractive as a Bermuda grass. So we'll see what they are as they come through. Okay, another question is how often should fertilizers be applied? That depends on your water source. Again, if you are on reclaimed water, I would say that you could probably fertilize twice a year and be okay. If you're on city water or lake water, we recommend quarterly fertilizations because most products have a maximum sustainability to break down and provide for 90 days. There are 180-day products out there. However, even though you're only supplying them twice a year, the cost of the product is very prohibitive based on budgets typically. And we find that doing it 3 or 4 times is actually less. You know, that all depends on your property and what type of plant material and turf you have there. Okay. All right, so since we are talking of fertilizations and we're moving on to mulching now, last question I'll address here is, what does a 40-pound bag cover? So based on each product, it will tell you the recommended square foot per bag. Most 40-pound bags of, say, a 20-010 turf fertilizer will cover roughly 10,000 square feet. Those amounts vary when it comes down to ornamental plant material, because they're not kind of separating that by square feet, but by covering it by inches of caliper or shrubs within the bed. So they actually take into account both. So that's a little bit different and can vary substantially. Okay. All right, I'll come back to some of these questions a little later. We'll get started on the next slide. Okay, so mulching. This is a very topical debate within homeowner and condo associations as to frequency, need. Is it a waste? Does it get blown out by the landscapers when they're blowing? Does it get washed out by the rain when we have hard summer rains? So let's talk a little bit about the benefits, and then we can talk about the reasons why you may or may not, or what are the alternatives. So mulching simply refers to the recycling of materials. This will extend to the mulching of either the grass clippings in St. Augustine, because now it's, kind of adversely, zoysias and Bermudas do not promote leaving the grass clippings there. They are to be either bagged up, vacuumed, raked, and removed, whereas St. Augustine grass clippings are meant to go back into the turf to break down as organic material. We are not to rake those up or remove them here in Florida. Mulch can also be used as, or can be considered leaf droppings, wood products to act as a ground cover. So these are the main benefits to mulching. Really to help prevent the loss of water by evaporation. It's in doing that, it helps maintain a more uniform soil temperature. We've done studies where we have used a temperature gun, laser gun, and shot a bed that has no mulch on it, and at the same time of day, say 2 p.m., and then shot a bed that's got 3 inches of mulch. And there's about a 15-degree difference between a bare soil and a mulched bed. It doesn't, that's quite shocking, and it's unbelievable that it does it, but that you'll find that is pretty true. Same as if you were to shoot concrete and turf, you get about a 15-degree to 20-degree difference as well. Mulch should never be applied less than 2 inches in a given period of time. If you were to remulch every 6 months and you already had an inch down, you could definitely get away with only applying an inch of mulch in the second application, so that you're maintaining that 2 to 3 inch depth. But anything less will allow that mulch to heat up and allow potential sunlight to break through and germinate the weed seeds that exist in the soil below. One thing we talked about before with runoff was, because we don't have soil and we have sand, we find it's very possible that the sand gets what we call crusting. And when it does that, it reduces the ability to absorb the water or for it to percolate through. And we find that it literally will bead off of the top of that soil once it's crusted. Very different how you would go to a beach, and if you were to pour a bucket of water, the water disappears immediately, because that is a true sand. Whereas our mix of sand soil can become very dense and compact from rainfall, etc. Okay, mulch. Why do we recommend as a landscaper to apply it? One of the things it does is it will break down. And when it does break down over the course of 4 or 5 months, it creates an organic material, which then ultimately increases the nutrient content into that soil that we have found here is very nutrient depleted. So, and again, the mulch area, we've also found if you've installed a plant with no soil, you'll find that root system simply goes into the soil and will do its thing. We've even found that a 2-inch layer of mulch up to a plant will also send root systems into that mulch in order to get moisture as it's retained in that layer, and nutrients. And it absolutely will create an increase in the number of roots versus an unmulched plant. And personally, I think mulch adds a little bit of beauty to the bed versus seeing just a light gray soil. And there's many colors of mulch. My particular favorite is one called chocolate or pine bark brown. It's just a nice deep brown color. And then there's obviously black, and there's cypress and melaleuca, my least favorite being red. I just feel it looks the most unnatural and fades the quickest, and a lot of times has a color into it that is not necessarily organic. All right, here's just a fun slide. The main reason of this slide is to show you how nice of a transition from mulch to grass, but I always say it's great when you find a landscape bed that's got gnomes or tchotchkes or solar lights just stuck in anywhere with no real rhyme or reason. And I say it's a landscaper's dream because they're just targets for us. And there might be one in there, but I'll guarantee you our mower is going to pick up the rock that's going to find that one gnome sitting there. And next thing you know, we're replacing a gnome. So always a hassle, but it's I guess it's fun for the homeowner to put their touch on that bed. So. All right. Okay. So how do we determine whether or not we should use mulch, plants, or turf? This really comes down to the commercial site being developed. The bed areas will tend to be narrow in nature. They'll create a scenario where a choice has to be made. And in most circumstances, turf grass is used due to its economic nature of being less per square foot versus mulch or a plant. Many times an 18-inch thick band of grass will struggle, and I've got some slides here to follow that up, due to the maintenance practice that's used to cut it. Either you can't get a proper mower in there, we have to weed eat it, the proximity to concrete, and its ability to disperse heat or put irrigation heads that can properly irrigate it. Mulch may be considered, but often it's rejected just due to its requirements to be replenished every few months. And in most situations, a shrub or grass is the correct choice, but the condition is going to dictate that. So, and here's a prime example. I think this was a Home Depot in Lake Worth or Okeechobee. This at one point had a hillside of turf grass. It was a very steep slope. Obviously, there's a row of shrubs at the top. We've got some palms along this way. This is a really difficult site for a mower to access and not put stress as it's going sideways, because this slope is so short, you can't cut this one going up and down, because we want to try to put on a different pattern each time you mow it. But because this one can only be taken parallel to the bank, all of the weight of that machine is resting on the bottom wheel, which is then in turn compressing down on the turf grass, breaking the roots, making it, fall away. And this is the end result after a year or two of turf being put in. So, you're getting a lot of runoff here coming off of the curb onto the parking lot now that there's no material here. Because it's runoff, there's very little organic material causing the soil to break down and run off. And, just very difficult situation to maintain. But none of you have something that looks like that in your community on a back berm, I'm sure. All right, this is a Publix parking lot. I remember taking this photo to point out This is a prime example of what should be planted within this strip of area between a parking lot or parking area, sidewalk, and another parking area. Turf grass, yeah, might be the alternative that was selected. However, the problem here is that you've got two impervious areas side by side. The concrete on both sides is, like I said, 15 to 20 degrees warmer than the actual turf grass is, so will cause that to burn up and cause the root systems to struggle and stay moist. You notice they've got the oak trees there, which I love to see. However, the oak tree, depending on the time of day, is either shading one parking space or the sidewalk. And if you notice the color of the sidewalk, when it rains, the water sits on there, it doesn't dry off, it becomes, fungusy and slippery, which then, obviously becomes a hazard or liability to the property owner. And this strip of grass is never going to survive in that particular situation. All right, so let's talk about mowing when we do have grass. Most properties in South Florida have St. Augustine or Floratam, and the maintenance of this cultivar is really important. Not only will we correct the height or correct the correct height being mowed, will increase the density, but it'll also increase the root health and help suppress the weeds if you've got a nice full lawn. It will also help runoff because its ability to process water much more quickly than, say, a shrub or a paved area. If it does have a healthy root system, that's going to ensure that the nutrients are absorbed versus being wasted or run off. Fewer weeds in the turf means less need for herbicide. And that is, I will tell you, that is probably the one item here in Florida that is the most critical to HOAs, is the ability to get rid of weeds in St. Augustine turf. And it really comes down to just the correct practices right from the start. And that, pertains to the number of mowings. We have properties that, unfortunately have budgeted, say, 24, 26 mows that we will turn away. We really need 36 mows on a property to help keep the grass at the correct height. Because what happens is if you get down to those 26, 28 mows per year, there are times you're going in the summer not mowing for 2 weeks and that grass is now 8 inches tall and you're taking off half of the blade, which is very unhealthy for the turf and will really make it struggle. And then you're also dropping twice as much of the grass clippings back into the turf, which is then going to create a thatch that may not be able to break down quick enough for that next 4 to 6 inches of grass being cut off at the next mowing. So it's all directly related. Fewer weeds means less herbicide, and that's one of the last things we want to apply. Again, we're sitting on top of an aquifer. We really don't want to have to put chemicals into the turf, which makes up for the largest square footage of almost any of the property versus your shrub material or tree square footage. And as I said, grass recycling does not increase the thatch. It just decomposes rapidly and will return into fertilizer. Okay, pruning. And again, we are going to get on to the hurricane preparedness. I know there might be a lot of you that have joined this CEU to not only discuss Florida landscaping, but to also have some tips that you can bring back to your HOAs, condo association members, landscape liaisons, or for yourself of the best ways to prepare for a hurricane within the landscape. And I've got my top 10 list that I'm going to share with us later on. But in terms of pruning, how does this become part of routine maintenance? One, obviously it can improve the health of the shrub, controlling the growth or trimming off the dead material. Do we trim monthly? Do we trim quarterly? That's all based on the particular plant material that we're discussing. Can it be done with mechanical means, or does it need to be selectively pruned with a pair of shears or loppers or clippers? And all of that will determine or be determined based on the plant material that you have at hand on your particular property. One of the things that is very difficult within an HOA when you have bulk maintenance and you're not providing gardening service is to follow the contract, which is asking you to trim the plant material monthly, yet allowing those shrubs to flower. Because typically it'll take an entire month for that bud to produce, and then another month for that bud to open up and flourish. So it means you're going a couple of months without trimming that particular plant, and it really infuriates homeowners when it's being done. But on the back side, you're getting complaints that you didn't trim their plant material and they want a reduction in the cost because you didn't trim that material for that month. So you're got to find this balance as to meeting the requirements of the community, the board that's making the decisions, who's writing the contract, as well as satisfying the gardeners there that exist on the community that like to see everything bloom when they should, and I agree. All right. So knowing the right plant to put in the right place is going to eliminate many of the pruning requirements. And down there, I've listed some sites that are very helpful, which Ashley mentioned will be is being saved and will be sent to you for further research. All right, I kind of think this is fun. This is myths. So one of the and I'll, since this is not interactive and I don't have a crowd that typically I can ask for a show of hands, I will tell you that one of the biggest myths out there is that cutting the top of a plant will make the bottom thicken up. A lot of you see this head of hair I have going on. I've shaved my legs. Trust me, it doesn't work. It has not made the hair on my head grow back any quicker. So that is a myth. The only way you can get a plant to thicken up at the bottom is to make a cut of one of the branches coming off. Wherever you make one cut, you're going to get two branches come off. So you need to selectively go into the plant and trim as long as the branches at the bottom, if this is not too mature of a shrub, you will get that to produce a second branch. If you've got anything 3/4 of an inch or larger, it's going to be very difficult for that to produce a second branch at that location. So that is one myth that I would like to clarify. Trimming the top will not make the bottom thicken up. I've also heard rocks are just like mulch, right? Well, no, the difference is rocks do not break down. They do not provide any organic material once they once they're placed there. The biggest difference why we cannot correlate rocks to mulch is that they don't help moderate soil temperature. They don't help retain moisture. What they do help is increase the temperature of the soil below them by a substantial amount. And because they're so hot, the water that goes through them and hits the top, it's like going into a sauna. If you remember the old days, I think now the machines probably just do it themselves, but you used to have to scoop up a cup of water and throw it on the rocks to get it to steam. Well, if you imagine the rainwater hitting a rock that's 115 degrees, that water is turning into steam immediately and not passing to the soil. So yes, rocks are beautiful. Yes, a lot of people want them, and yes, landscapers will recommend them, but you also have to understand the consequences of putting them there. All right. One of the complaints, being a landscape contractor, that we hear is that you must not have fertilized my palms. I don't see any fertilizer at the base. So if we can just talk a little bit about root structure. So there is something called a root shoot ratio. That correlates to not only the branches, but it correlates to the length of the branches, fronds, etc., and to where the root system has extended out to. The best place to fertilize any palm trees, any shrubs, or any trees is at the drip line. I just want to say that again, is at the drip line. So for example, if you've got a Adenidia palm and it's 8 feet tall and it has fronds coming off all the way around the tree 6 feet out, you would want to create a circle 6 feet out and apply 1 pound of fertilizer per inch of trunk. So if that trunk is 8 inches across, you should use 8 pounds of fertilizer spread out 6 feet in a ring around the drip line of the palm. That is the best way to fertilize a palm tree because that is where the feeder roots are at. There is some hairs on the palm roots directly below where the tree meets the soil. However, nowhere near as many as at the tips of the root system. And a lot of times we're limited. So yes, there are times you will find fertilizer placed at the base of palms, but that's because that palm tree is placed at the corner of the driveway and the sidewalk, and all the roots are underneath that impervious surface. So we are then forced to put fertilizer down at the base to give it any chance at all of getting some fertilizer. So, a myth too about, say, trees, for example, of what is the best fertilizer to use for a tree. Well, it does depend on whether or not it needs alkaline or acidic soils. But most of the time, trees don't require a heavy amount of additional fertilizer because it's getting it through the nutrients provided to the turf. Roundup. Okay, Roundup is we should just make a whole nother presentation on Roundup, but I will tell you that Roundup becomes inert the minute it hits soil if there is no plant there. It has no properties present to it that can affect anything once it hits that soil and is absorbed if there is no plant or root system there on top. So that is just something we should all know. Spraying the soil around a bed of plants will not affect. If you topically spray that shrub or plant, yes, it will have a major effect on the outcome of the plant surviving. The last myth is we can't hurt a plant or turf with too much water. Absolutely wrong. That is, we've touched on it before. Yes, you can. That is something that you can have a major effect on by overwatering turf or shrubs. All right. And one of the things I'd like for you to maybe put in there too is, besides question, is as a manager, property manager, as a LCAM, as a board of director, as a landscape liaison, or just a homeowner, what type of challenges or issues are you facing within your community? Okay. The responsible management of pesticides, and I think we are moving at a good pace here. So I think we'll wrap everything up and have good time here for hurricane preparedness. So all of the previous components that we've discussed, if they are all managed correctly, hopefully it'll alleviate any need for pesticides, but that's a perfect world. The concept of IPM, which stands for Integrated Pest Management, is really just that. It's the emphasis on doing those 4 components that we touched on in the previous slides: mowing, trimming, fertilization, and irrigation. If we are able to have the right plant planted in the right place from the very beginning, with the right maintenance practices put in for whether it be a shrub, ground cover, turf, etc., along with the right agronomic program, pesticides hopefully should become a thing of the past. However, that's just not what we have here in Florida. Unfortunately, with all of the container ships coming in to the various ports, there are new pests introduced into Florida on a daily basis. Some of them will have effects, others will not. And we could go back to the 80 odd varieties of whitefly that are present, whether it be spiraling whitefly, the whitefly that will affect your ligustrum, or the gold mound duranta, potato, there's so many that we can discuss. And then we've got ladybugs that should eat aphids. And so there are, or biological properties that we can use. There's mechanical means, but the goal is to use as little chemical as possible. We do not want to blanket spray a property for any of these items, whether it be fungus or chinch. or any virus that we may encounter. We really just want to treat the area when it shows up. I'd love to tell you that I wish properties had the budget to use pre and post products. The problem is when you're blanket treating a whole property with, say, an ant program or a chinch program, we're putting that much more chemical down, and it's not ideal, yet it can produce a very aesthetically pleasing landscape. Okay, let me see here if we've got any questions. It might be a good time to answer a few questions before I read this very wordy. And somebody was trying to impress somebody putting this this Florida statute together, which is the 482 law, which regards around pest control. I'll read it real quick before, and then we'll maybe take a question or two that might pertain to this. The selection, integration, and implementation of multiple pest control techniques based on the predictable economic, ecological, and sociological consequences, making the maximum use of naturally occurring pest controls such as weather, disease, agents, and parasitoids using various biological, physical, chemical, and habitat modification methods of control, and using artificial controls only as required to keep the particular pests from surpassing the intolerable population levels that are predetermined from an accurate assessment of the pest damage potential and the ecological, sociological, and economic costs of the other measures to control that pest. Okay, got through it. So what does that mean? It basically means that the licensing for pest control really wants the applicator to use an informed decision as to whether or not it makes sense to apply the chemical to control the problem they're trying to get underhand and make go away. If it makes sense to use it, use it. If it doesn't, and that you can use a biological product, like I said, such as releasing a jar of ladybugs onto a hibiscus that's covered in aphids, great, try to use that method. But a lot of times that's not feasible, and we have to use a product that is labeled to have an effect on the issue at hand. So this license requirements, it's going to require a pest control to have the state licensed, as well as a local occupational license. They're going to need to have an understanding of the limited certification that's required for a commercial landscape maintenance operator, the pest control business license, as well as the operator license. We now have also a requirement for arborist licenses, depending on the county, municipality. And as I said, back in 2014, the law was introduced that you need to be certified to apply fertilizers, but you also need to have the ability or have the license to apply herbicide, weed and feed, as well as that should be feed. I apologize. It's weed and feed. That fertilizer now, which has only, so this is something new. I did not bring this up earlier, but this slide helps me remind to talk about it. There's this term weed and feed. A lot of people love to hear that their property is getting weed and feed at a particular time of year. All sounds great up until a few years ago, when the state mandated that the allowable amount of atrazine in any bag of fertilizer is maxed at 1%, which really is not all that effective. So we have found as landscape maintenance contractors that we really need to go to liquid applications that will selectively treat the various weeds that may be found in that turf grass. The weed and feed no longer is applicable and is not effective, as well as pesticide. And I can tell you, back in 2014, when those laws came into effect, Palm Beach County alone increased the number of people going out and inspecting for these licenses by 13 in the county alone, to try to, kind of conjure up as much revenue as they could of giving fines. There was a number of people stung as a result who didn't follow the rules. Okay, that IPM procedure versus going straight to chemical. The main reason why you want to have that licensing or that understanding is you need to identify the pest. If you can't identify the pest, how are you going to treat for it properly? Do you know whether it's a thrip, a lacewing? Is it fungus? Is it, well, which type of fungus? Is it brown spotch? Is it take all root rot? What is it? So you have to identify what it is in order to know how to treat it and whether or not there is a procedure, through integrated pest management, or are we going straight to chemical? Also, targeting that particular life cycle. A grub, for example, are you going to want to treat that while it's in the egg form or larva nymph stage, as a pupa, or as the adult when it appears coming up as the beetle? As a grub, if you see a white grub, for example, has a brown head. If you notice, that will turn into a brown beetle when it is adult, climbs out of that turf and flies away. So when are you treating that to give the least amount of effect on the root system that grub is feeding off of while it lives in the soil? Which then brings you to the cultural, mechanical, physical, biological means. Which way are you going to treat it? And then decide which method is the most appropriate based on the stage. And will that action reduce the population to a tolerable level? That's really what we're trying to figure out. Is it going to have the effect needed to kind of minimize the effects it's going to have on that area? So, all right, couple of just little slides to break it up, and I promise I will hit a couple of questions here before wrapping up with the hurricane preparedness. We're about an hour and 25 minutes in. So here's a picture of a landscape front entrance. This is what we find, which is very typical in South Florida. There's going to be a matrix that you have to follow as a developer. It's going to require a certain canopy square footage as a mature tree and palm that are planted within the lot size, a certain square footage of turf grass, as well as a certain amount or number of shrubs that are required. That usually leads to a nice tiered landscape with a nice canopy. And the nice, I wouldn't say nice thing, but at least this oak is not planted 1 foot away from the driveway where it's going to be lifting roots, but that possibility still is there. And there are some good spacing on those shrubs. All right, so this is just I'm going to read down, and I apologize for the spelling errors on this. It locked into a PDF. I wasn't able to change it last night, but I'm going to read through this list of trees, palms, plants, and I want to get your thoughts on whether or not this is appropriate. So there are 5 Magnolia DD Blanchards, which we know here in South Florida. Those will grow about 30 to 40 feet tall by about 12 to 15 feet wide. 4 Montgomery palms, 2 silver Bismarcks, which have the capability, depending on whether they're queens or not, to grow up to 60 feet and have a head 20 feet wide. 2 oak trees, which can also 40 feet tall, 30 feet wide. 3 fishtail palm clusters, 2 traveler palms, a ligustrum, and 2 lady palm clusters within 4,000 square feet. How do you think that's going to work out for being planted in somebody's lot? Or how do you think it's going to work out if planted in somebody's 0 lot line side? So this is a picture that I took at a community in Palm Beach Gardens. You can't see either home, but there is a home about 3 feet off to the left side of the picture, and another home about 4 or 5 feet off to the right side of the home. This is about I think it's about 100-foot run from front to back and about 40 foot wide. So like I said, it's about 4,000 square feet. What do we see there? Well, yeah, everything looks nice and green. It's definitely being fertilized, which is fantastic, but look at the turf or lack of turf, which is now, and you can see gray sand, it's not black soil. That's mulch on the left, but that is our area that is just extremely struggling. There's no ability for the water to be absorbed. It's just not going to work. And this is, either a homeowner decided they need ultimate privacy, or there was a sale on that week for the developer to plop all that stuff in there. Okay, this is what a zero lot line home should look like. So we have a 1-story home on the left. There's a 2-story home on the right. There are individual palms planted to potentially, I'm thinking, block a window looking down. There's a wide enough strip of grass. This is the same section as before. It's 40 foot wide by 100-foot run, where it just, somebody took common sense, let's just put it that way, and did not overplant the area, tastefully decided to give enough ability for that grass to receive enough sunlight to survive. Nice transition to the turf, to the thing, and just everything's working out. Here's a builder special royal palm planted 1 foot away from the driveway, which is a Cuban royal. Does require a fair amount of water, planted next to a 30-foot tall cypress that is, requires no water. It's arid, found in the desert. I mean, complete, just makes no sense, but that's what was there. And then about 4 feet in front of that royal palm, you can see a small little utility box, which is for, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was like cable and FPL where they popped up. I mean, it's just a matter of time before those pavers are destroyed. The root systems wrapped around the utilities. And I guarantee you, nobody parks and utilizes that parking space there, because those palm fronds are 40 to 50 pounds each. Just a shot of a poorly maintained oak tree in a plaza. So I was saying to you how those ordinances were developed and why they were developed when they were. This is a prime example of a community or an area. This is Okeechobee Boulevard, where there was no landscape matrix required in order to obtain a certificate of occupancy. This is nothing but a concrete jungle, very difficult to find. And if you've ever walked on it, it's also 20 to 30 degrees hotter than if you were to, say, walk next to Gander Mountain, which has a great pedestrian traffic. Here they really good transition of the oak trees planted that are shading the parking areas, no turf grass. It's all Fakahatchee or sand cord grass. It not only looks great, but it's serving the purpose. And here's another great example. So this plaza was developed after the time that the ordinance came into effect, and you wouldn't even know it, but there's a public shopping plaza back there, McDonald's, gas stations, restaurants, banks. You'd have no idea. Yeah, maybe the tenants or the businesses don't love it so much because their signs are not visible. But I tell you, it's a nicer, safer, more comfortable feeling of walking and parking in that plaza than somewhere else. All right, so we're going to wrap this up real quick. I'm going to take some questions, and then we're going to go on to hurricane preparedness. The last study, and I'm just bringing this up because if you've signed up for this today, this 2-hour CU class, you should also understand the effect and the reason why landscaping is typically one of the largest budget items in any community. It's deemed that it's one of the #1 causes for why a home will retain its value or sell is because of the curb appeal. Back in 2010, a study was done to figure out exactly what is the effects of landscape, whether it be installation, maintenance, nursery, here on our local economy. And in 2010, it was found that it has about a $15.3 billion net effect, or revenue being brought into the state based on the practices done within the landscape industry. It, back in 2010 again, produced about 205,000 jobs, and they're listed by sales and employment. And I'm not sure where all of our guests that have joined us today are from, but there's a good breakdown to show where those jobs by employment and the counties by sales as to which has the biggest impact here in the state. I'm in Palm Beach County and Broward, ranked 3rd and 5th. We also get into Martin, and Martin's not on this one, but I'm sure it's up there now because there's a lot of development going north beyond into that Treasure Coast tri area up there. All right, let's get to the next one. And okay, also those landscape firms that are existing, and there are of course hundreds that probably are running without licenses that are not included, mom and pop firms that don't necessarily being registered with the state but are still practicing landscape here in the state. The sales in billions on the left in 2010 was $2.2 billion being generated from homeowner associations, $1.3 billion from apartments and condos, and then you've got your commercial establishment, builders wealth. All of this is regarding the sales of landscape maintenance, and you'll see on the right broken down maintenance, installation, design, and other landscaping services, reaching a total of about $6 billion in revenue created on average per year, and the percentages of that to how they do that. So I am going to stop sharing right now, and I will, let's see here, see how I bring myself up. I don't know if I can or not, but Diego, am I up on the screen?
Yep, you're on the screen, Shane.
Okay, all right, no problem. I just didn't want to be a blank screen there. Thank you.
Nope, you're on the screen. Are you going to do some questions now, you said?
Yeah, so we're
Okay.
definitely, was there any in particular that you saw come up that you thought I should address, or just go through as I've done? And
I think it's good if you want to go through. Yeah, why don't you go through? We have some time since we're finishing earlier. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, okay, there's so if we're talking of, Chase asked, is there any lawn or tree diseases that we should look out for? I think we know or don't know right now, one of the most talked about turf diseases is the mosaic or sugarcane, which is incurable, and finding is popping up in some communities throughout Florida. We're finding that that needs to be removed, sprayed out, killed, and can be replaced with a Kentucky blue that has been successful. It's been utilized to replace that particular turf, and there's some others that are coming out now that also might be recommended. Let's see. Okay, somebody just missed a slide regarding new grass, no fertilizer. That is correct. You want to give at least 30 to 60 days to not fertilize new turf. Most of the time, the sod farms have already fertilized it, prior to being cut and sent to you, and you don't want to burn those freshly cut roots. Yes, okay to use pine needles for mulch, depending on your plant material. I think natives do better with pine straw, pine needles, as opposed to a non-native shrub. Let's see. I did touch on rocks as mulch. Bulk or bagged, I think somebody's asking in regards to mulch. That's really budget preference and application methods. Can the bulk mulch, which may be blown in, can the tubes reach the area where you're looking to have done versus a 2 cubic foot bag being carried to an area? That really comes down to the site specific. Rubber mulch, I have mixed feelings on rubber mulch only because it doesn't provide nutrients. However, I think there's an absolute application for rubber mulch in playgrounds. I think the rule of thumb is that you're to apply 1 inch of rubber mulch per foot of potential fall in a playground setting, but you might just want to check the manufacturer's recommended guidelines for that. But I know for sure we have used it multiple times in a landscape, in a playground setting or a landscape area that does not have the need to break down or to create any nutrients for what's there. If you are going to mulch around a trunk of a palm tree, you should keep the mulch a minimum of 2 to 3 inches away from the base, so that it does not hold moisture against the base of the palm tree, which could, potentially cause a rotting situation. And it'll also allow the water to kind of cool off of the top of the mulch and get right to the base. Mulch keeps the soil temperature cooler, not warmer. That was a quick question there. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience with orchid use. That tends to be more of a gardening situation. I just don't use a lot of them, so I apologize. I can't answer that question regarding orchids. Okay. Yes, somebody asked about scheduling. I talked about 36 mows kind of being an ideal. We have properties that go anywhere from 28 to 44. 36 for us seems to be a good blend. It typically gives us the ability to mow weekly from May through October, and then every other week from November through April. So that tends to be a good balance. Let's see here. Touched on rubber mulch. I think we're getting to a lot of them here. Okay, somebody was asking, talk about whitefly. Okay, briefly. So depends on what type of whitefly. There are literally, I think, over 100 versions of whitefly. You've got your spiraling rugose, which might affect ligustrum, ficus, coconuts, adenidias. You've got potato whitefly, which will affect your gold mound durantas. You've got regular whitefly that can go on almost any shrub if the host is weak, because again, most times a pest moves in when there's a weakness found. So if it doesn't have the proper nutrients, you can find there can be a number of items that will come in. Robert asked, how do you treat sedge in turf? I am a big fan of a product called Sedge Hammer. It's very effective against your yellow and purple nut sedge. That is a selective treatment that does not affect your St. Augustine turf. That can be found at a vendor such as Site One. Really good product. Somebody talked about Phantasma, which is that's a long topic. I can message you privately to get into Phantasma, because there's a lot to be said about that right now. Lack of information and information that may or may not be correct. Okay, let's see. You do not need a certificate to add soil in a condo association unless that condo is backing up to the ocean and you're trying to do it on the dune. That may be something that would require you to consult with somebody or discuss a permit, but typically not require any type of certificate. Okay, all right. So one last question here. Philip's asking about seasonal flower replacement. It really comes down to your budget. I find 2 rotations are ample. However, we can get into 3, if the budget permits to it, but a mid to late April for a summer annual is ideal, and a late October, November is ideal for the annual or the winter annual. However, I'll tell you, our summers seem to be becoming elongated, and getting these high 80s and low 90 temperatures in October doesn't do well for those newly planted annuals, for the winter season in late October. So, all right. Going back to the sedge treatment, last one here, that is something that you do once with that particular product, treat again within 10 days, and then you could move on and monitor going forward after that to see what your kill rate is. All right, so thank you for those great questions. And I'm gonna use the last few minutes to talk about my top 10 items for hurricane preparedness. All right, so number 1, you want to make sure prior, if you know a storm's out on the water, And I'm going to decide, kind of dictate why this makes the list, and depending on whether there's a storm on the water or this should just be part of your maintenance practice throughout the year. Storm on the water, I'm going to say that you should check all of your gutters, drain systems to make sure there's no debris, litter, leaves, anything potentially blocking them. And also what leads into those systems. If it's individual homes that have the ability to dump directly to a swale within the street, you want to make sure that the individual homeowners' gutters are cleaned out and not going to be dumping a number of items into there. The typical, so this one is, we're just talking about storms because we live in Florida. Maintenance practices, your landscape contractor should be keeping on top of your shrubs and trees by removing rotting or damaged branches all year round. That's not something you should panic and do right at storm season, just because you don't want to create debris that you're going to leave at the street prior to a storm event happening. There is a myth that you should prune all of your palm trees prior to hurricane season. That is not accurate. Same with your trees. Your trees should just be on an annual maintenance program that don't require you to rush and get them done and open up the canopy or, do a structural prune, in May, knowing that hurricane season is around the corner. That should be done September, November, February. It should be done at any time of the year and will allow that tree to survive and do its best if that material is maintained all year round. You don't want to prune up any palm trees. The more green fronds left on your palm gives the ability for that palm trees, those fronds, to be whipped up and protect the heart, which is in the center of the palm tree, to give it its best possible chance to survive. All you want to take off is the completely brown and dead fronds prior to a storm event. You do, however, want to take off the coconuts. Those can become, missiles. And so that is one palm tree that you do want to make sure is maintained throughout the hurricane season. And depending on the type, whether it's a Jamaican tall, a green Malayan, a yellow Malayan, a maypan, they fruit at different times of the year. So you may find yourself needing to trim those in November. It just depends on what you have on your property. All right. One of the key I will say items on the list that pertains to a storm on the water and impending is to turn off your irrigation system. Obviously, where you're going to get a very large, typically rain event when a storm comes in, there's absolutely no need to have your irrigation system on. And all that does also is allow potentially for that system to be on, power surges, cause it to burn out, cause if a pipe breaks and then the system is struggling to pull water from somewhere because a tree became uprooted and broke the suction line, you just have more reasons for potential damage to your irrigation system. So I always suggest turn off your irrigation system a few days prior to the storm system. So that also pertains, now this is not necessarily a landscape item, but I pull this one in because I'm thinking that a lot of you that are participating in this lesson to this class today also have purview or oversight onto the pools. So I would also say to turn off your pool pumps. They say it's not necessary to lower your pool water substantially because that could lead to structural issues. And also, again, like I said, if your pool's running and the root systems happens to be low or crack a pipe, it could cause the pump to continually cycle, putting air into it and cause motor issues. I would definitely say that one item is to tie down any large items out in the landscape, whether that be statues, monuments that have large bowls on them for plant material that could potentially be blown off. Might be not a bad idea to either set down or tie down. Okay, and my last item that is something that is somewhat subjective, but in my experience, I have found that trees, whether they be 2-inch caliper up to 8-inch that are fairly new, but still being established, that have the 2x4 wooden bracing system that bands the 3 or 4 straps together, we find that when a strong wind event comes in, that tree is more likely to be snapped at the location where the brace is holding it to the struts, as opposed to if that tree had the braces removed, where it would be blown down. So as a community, you will make a decision to remove those or leave them and hope that the wind is not so strong that it snaps them. However, it is definitely less costly to take a tree that has been laid down from the wind and stand it back up and rebury it than to have to remove the tree and replace it with a new one. So if that tree happens to be just utilizing a strap system, I would say to definitely just loosen off the straps slightly, give it a few inches of room to maneuver, and so that it does not snap. And those braces will never be strong enough to the strapping to cause that tree to snap where the most pressure is putting on. It'll just lay it down. And then obviously you want to, for those trees, it might also make sense too to have those 2x4s removed, so they also don't become missiles if it is a really strong storm event. So I hope those 10 items are helpful, and I hope we don't ever have to worry about that for years to come. And the path takes it away from our coast, but I would like to take the opportunity to thank you all today for who joined us. And I really appreciate you signing up, and look forward to hopefully another presentation regarding some of the other new items that we're affecting here in South Florida. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, Shane. We really appreciate it. I am going to be launching a poll right now, so that should have come up automatically. If you guys can take that for us, it's just going to give us some feedback on how we did. I am going to also put in the chat here a link to the evaluation. So we are going to be issuing your credits. I will also be sending an email afterwards with the presentation, contact information, everything, as I mentioned at the beginning of the course. And this will also have the evaluation in it. And when I end this, the evaluation should pop up automatically. But if you want to go ahead, I did put it in the chat as well. So we do need you to fill out that evaluation so we can give you your credits, and you'll be getting 2 credits. And then I think that's everything. I've got the poll going right now. And thank you so much, Shane, for conducting the course.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Ashley.
Yes, have a great day. Bye, everyone.